Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. Have another fantastic show planned out here for you today. I am very excited to you. Clint, new face. Great to have you on here. Really excited to talk to you.
I'm setting the curve. I'm setting the curve on faces.
That's it. There you go. And while he's setting the curve, everybody else should be setting something like the like button, the subscribe chat, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell, doing all that great stuff. Now, as a quick heads up, none of us are doctors. I say this every time now, but just to clear it up, anything we do say is our own personal experience and anecdotal evidence from stuff. So if you hear something that you want to learn more about, do your own research, look it up, do that kind of stuff, or ask us a question. Throw it in the comments here. We'll put it up on screen. We'll discuss it, and we'll go from there. Like this one right here, Chris K. Happy Friday, and Red, Chimo, Chris. So that's what we're going to get into. But before we get started in the conversation, Clint, why don't you give us a quick 30-second, 45-second blurb on who you are, where you come from, all that good stuff. Giver. Is he frozen? He might be frozen. This is how we start a podcast right here.
We're back.
There you go. Can you hear you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was,
there we go. You were frozen for a second, but carry on.
Oh, this should be a fun one.
This is going to be a fun one. Clint, are you there? We're good. You're jumping in and out. This is
it's
the fun part of
live. This is the Wi-Fi issue.
There we go. Oh, and all right. Well, you know what? I'm going to bring him back in a second once that gets cleared up.
Sounds good, buddy.
So
why bring him back on? Why don't I just relay what I was chirping about in my live potty so that it gives a little bit of backstory to maybe we can launch into that with him. And so what I was saying, I didn't know who the guest was. I didn't know the guest was Clint. I also didn't know what the topic was going to be. So in my live IG podcast that I just came out of, what I'd said was, well, I don't know anything about this guy, but here's what I do know about football players, though I couldn't really probably name 5 football teams. So it's not my sport, and it's not something that I track or have interest in. It's not that I hate on the sport. It's just not my sport. I said my familiarity with football players is when I was with the Skyhawks in 1989, part of the Canadian parachute demonstration team. We jumped into an open-air stadium in Edmonton. It was the Edmonton Eskimos versus the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And I did a hard fish hook to come in through the stadium and basically fly between the uprights and land on the middle of the field. And as I was gathering my parachute and waving to the crowd, and the crowd was going insane. It was a packed stadium. I could actually feel the crowd in the air before I heard them. I could feel the vibration of the crowd going insane for the big Canada flag. So I'm grabbing my chute, I'm running off the field, and all the football players are running on. And I was about 162 pounds at the time. And these guys were like twice my size. And these monsters are running towards me. And all I could think was like, whoa, look at the size of these guys. This is insane. And as they were running onto the field, they were looking at me and saying the same thing. Bro, you're insane. That was so wild. That's crazy. You're a madman, all of that stuff. And that's what I was thinking about them. So as we're high-fiving and punching each other in the shoulder kind of thing, all I could think of was, man, this lifestyle is a lifestyle that I don't understand at all. They're twice my size, making 1 million times more than I make for a salary, and but they're living their best life. They're really getting after it. And so I was curious to learn more about Clint now that he's back live in the body. I was curious to learn more about how challenging or how unusual it was for him to step away from a lifestyle that brings fame and brings eyeballs on you and brings big salary and brings a sense of team community, celebrity, all of the trappings of what I imagine, because I don't know, I'm just imagining that lifestyle has a lot of sexiness to it. To go from there to a kind of basic training, now you're in the sand getting wet and gritty. I'm just kind of curious to hear more about this.
Well, listen, if you're doing it for kind of the visibility, the fame, the money, the sexiness of it stuff, then that might be a disappointment as you move from one to the other. But I never really was like, for me, one of the questions I get asked often, and it's probably a question you're used to as well, given our backgrounds. Like, hey, what's your favorite gun? And I always slow down and go, hey, are you asking? And this kind of answers a little bit of your question. I go, are you asking what my favorite gun is or what my favorite weapon is? And they'll kind of go, it's the same thing, depending on who I'm talking to. And I go, no, it's not. A gun is a tool. A weapon is what I use to win. My favorite weapon is and always will be the map. The map is my favorite weapon because the map tells me where the bad guy is, what to bring, what to leave, how to get there, how to get home. And if we kind of look at life like that, one of the things I tell people is like, if we have a map, the worst we'll ever be is wrong, but we won't be lost. And wrong and lost are different animals, right? Like I love the maps behind you right now. And so as I kind of use that to describe my life as a metaphor, I kind of describe my life as having been lived on literally these four maps: the ball field, the battlefield, the boardroom, and the breakfast table. And they're both kind of metaphorical as well. Like the ball field describes my season of life as an athlete. You know, growing up here in Texas, playing football in college at the Naval Academy, or played briefly in the NFL. But now it means to me, it's how do I guide and govern this adventure to take care of myself mentally and physically, so I keep performing at a really high level, right? And the battlefield describes my season of life as a member of the Special Operations Community in the military, and but now it just kind of describes this adventure to protect those who've been entrusted me morally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. The boardroom describes this season of life where I'm providing for myself and my family and my teammates here at work. And the breakfast table is the most important, which is being part of a family that loves me and that matters to others. And I feel like all of life is about having exes worth going to and people worth going with. And then you just got to do the work. And so why that transition from the ball field to the battlefield for me was probably more seamless than it might seem. It's because I was doing the ball field for the same reasons that I was doing the battlefield. And what I loved about the game, you know, because I was never the quarterback or anything like that, man. I love the violence. I love the camaraderie. I love the brotherhood. I love the opportunity to measure my will against another person's for 75 snaps, you know, on Saturday and Sunday. Like, hey, and who's doing it better? Like, I loved all the intangibles. And one of the reasons it was actually pretty easy to leave the NFL and go into the special operations community is, and not to diminish sports, the NFL. I mean, what a privilege, and what an opportunity that was to do that. But what I loved was over here times 10. You know, because my route was a little bit different than a lot of people's. But so for me, it was rather than a reduction of X, Y, and Z, it was perhaps the most pure form of X, Y, and Z. And one of the reasons you know, the high ground has always kind of been where I've always been trying to go, right, on those maps, both literally and figuratively. And so for me, on the ball field, the high ground is, you know, what is the peak of that endeavor? You know, playing Division I and playing in the NFL. And so for me, as I then moved to the military, because I never didn't want to serve. You know, you go to a service academy here in the States, and you have an obligation, and I call it an opportunity. For me, it was more of an opportunity than an obligation. So I found myself in the NFL, and having been given an opportunity to pursue becoming a member of the Special Operations community, and it just became really clear, right? Like what I knew when I was in the NFL is whatever this is, it's going to be more of what I already know. It's going to be, it's going to teach me more about myself that I already know about myself, right? And I just kind of got to go where you don't know. And I knew I could get to the NFL, didn't know how long I could stay, didn't know how good I could be. And I had no idea if I could make it through SEAL training. And I got to go where I don't know, because that's where you're going to learn about yourself. And so for me, it wasn't really. I mean, the money was significantly different. I mean, I remember my bride asked me, she goes, "Listen, I'm so proud that you want to serve. Just out of curiosity, like, how much money we just lose?" I was like, "Well, rookie minimum at the time, I think was like $400,000 a year or something." I said, "We're going to be making $25,250 living in San Diego, but we can shop at the commissary, and medical's free." So it's kind of the same thing, really. Yeah, and I get issued stuff. Like I don't have to buy clothes. And it's just kind of been an adventure since then. But for me, it's interesting to bring that up. I remember as a football player watching like the leapfrogs come in for games, and even now when I work with NFL teams and college teams, one of the things I tell people is like, I think all apex predators are curious about other apex predators. Like a lion doesn't like listening to another lion because we're insecure, like whatever, dude. But a tiger walks in the room and a lion's like, ooh, what are y'all on? Like, I didn't know you were that big. Like, there's an element of curiosity. There's an element of like, I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if I can do that. Because that one of those common qualities. So one of the things to continue that metaphor, the high ground, 14,000 feet is 14,000 feet. It doesn't matter what continent you're on, right? What it takes to get there and what it takes to stay there, there's a meaningful percentage of it that's really the same, whichever map you're on. And so for me, it's that constant pursuit of the high ground on the map that I find myself on that makes life in many ways feel the same as it did in these other seasons of my life. Does that make sense at all? Is that
I was gonna hit Shaun back with this, is that you say something very similar, you know, when you're pushing the pace or you're you know, the relentless pursuit of excellence.
Yeah.
That's a high ground. Shaun, what do you think? Is that basically the same thing?
I mean, Clint, we're maybe cut from the same cloth, and what you had said is really interesting to me. I'm going to tell a tiny little story to maybe reinforce the point for anyone out there who's listening. You mentioned the leapfrogs. So when I was on the Skyhawks, which is the equivalent of the leapfrogs to some degree, we were down in San Diego.
Oh yeah.
And we were down there to hook up with the leapfrogs to do a jump.
I probably know some of the guys that you jumped with.
I hope so. This was 1989. 1989 was when I jumped out. So we're on the tarmac, and you know how it goes. The first time that you're walking up on a guy and he's walking up on you, you're eyeballing each other.
It's that scene in Devil's Brigade when everyone's trying to figure out if they hate each other or love each other. As a default, I'm going to hate you until I know I love you.
Of course, yeah. So as we're all walking up on each other, everyone's evaluating each other. The hands are being shaken, but everyone's kind of eyeballing each other. And, and we're getting onto the plane, and we're all getting our gear all squared away, and we're getting up to altitude, and everyone's already kind of established we're all good to go. We're all the same vibe. We're all cut from the same cloth. We all know deal. And so we all got out in the air above San Diego, and we're living that large and in charge lifestyle. The moment that we all get to the deck and we're picking up our chutes and handshaking and high-fiving and living that awesome lifestyle, there was no difference from man to man. It was everyone saw eye to eye. Everyone was peers. Everyone got what was happening. And I think that's a really important concept when you're talking about transitioning from the NFL into the SEALs. It's kind of cut from the same cloth in some respect, in the sort of the teamwork, the velocity, the discipline, the focus, the work ethic, and all of these various things. From various industries to various industries, there's a lot of commonality. But to your point, 14,000 feet is 14,000 feet wherever you are.
The altitude imposes commonality, man. The altitude imposes. It opposes things in common, and it forces coalition because altitude is agnostic. It doesn't care. 14,000 feet, it doesn't care. It's like, you better be about the same stuff or I'm going to own you. And that's what I love about the water. I've always said the water, wilderness, and wild things, they put us in our place. They make us feel small but not insignificant, and they remind us, right? And so I like, for me, the high ground has kind of always been where I want to be on the map that I find myself on, because I'm going to be surrounded by people that scare me a little bit. Like, if I don't put out, I'm going to get left behind, and I like those terms. I kind of have this philosophy, kind of chase, pace, and pull. Like a lot of life comes down to who you're chasing and what life's going to look like if you catch them, and then keeping pace with people that mean what they say as much as you mean what you say. And then you got to pull someone behind you, because if you don't, you're going to be doing the thing longer than you want to or longer than you're good at it. And both of those are a disservice to the thing, whatever it is, right? So for me, I've always tried to chase people that I don't know if I can catch. on a daily basis, and which isn't hard because I'm not a super talented guy. Like it's not hard to find myself around people that I got to work hard to keep up with.
Dude, you'll never catch me. Have you seen the size of you? I'm running with fear. I'm not running with motivation. So
I will say I've got a pretty good little immediate circle of death, like maybe 5, 10. It gets shorter every year.
Less than
I promise you,
if it turns 50 meters, you're done.
Yeah, if it turns into cardio, I'll just wait for you to get to the water fountain later. Like I've become an ambush predator pretty quickly if it turns into cardio these days.
I'll look around the corners.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that, how do you make sure that you escape from a bear? Is that you're faster than your friend?
Faster than the other guy.
That's the key, right? Exactly. Now, let's get into the topic because we're kind of skirting around it right now. But the original topic that I wanted to do was putting on the line, and I like what you guys are talking about because it goes to that you're talking about after we put it on the line, right? Like living that lifestyle and being at 14,000 feet, doing all the seeking that high ground, but right at the beginning of it, you got to be willing to step up to that line, right? Same thing in football. You got to be willing every play to put the ball down and step on the line and get ready for another go round, regardless of what just happened. And so I'm wondering what your philosophy is on that in terms of putting it on the line. How do you?
Well, I think you become a little bit addicted to it. Like it really comes back to the first time you did something you didn't know you could do, and what that generated in you, and what it generated in those around you. Like this desire to collectively figure out what else you can do, and then it just becomes a form of application past that. Like I have a lot of we were talking about addiction the other day to a really close friend of mine. And he's just won some amazing battles with some dark demons, and he holds himself to a high standard as we all do. But I told him, I said, man, 2 things. We're all addicts. Just some of us are fortunate to get addicted to the right stuff early enough. But all of us have the capacity for addiction. It's just what you get addicted to, right? And then, the guilt is this interesting thing. I said, man, he's like, I feel guilty. I'm like, well, only the good wrestle with guilt. So if you wrestle with guilt, it means you are foundationally good. Otherwise, you wouldn't worry about it, right? So if you struggle with guilt, you kind of got 2 options, like become a dirtbag and not worry about it anymore, or just wrestle well and recognize that the phenomenon of guilt is restricted to those with a moral compass and high expectations of themselves and others, right? So as it came down to putting it on the line, I think at a very early age, I just kind of felt like that's where the air I wanted to breathe was, right? And so it's this kind of pursuit of the line, figuring out where it is, and then figuring out if I'm willing to do what it takes to get there. And then so it kind of becomes a little bit of a lifestyle, just going like, all right, where's the hardest place to be, and who are the hardest people to come up with, and go, and just take notes. And like for me, I have this, I get to go speak to a lot of companies, and it's really cool. And one of the things I have this kind of keynote called Pursuing Elite. And what I tell people on Pursuing Elite is this guy who's been fortunate to kind of be on the high ground on the ball for the battlefield and on the boardroom. And certainly as a husband and a daddy, I feel like I'm on the high ground every day as far as just the honor it is to be the husband of my bride and the father of my daughters, right? But what I say is like, hey, everyone's a leader. I maybe have a different view on leadership than other people because for me, leading's a verb. It's an action. And if you're leading, you're a leader. It doesn't really matter what your rank is. I mean, all rank or role really describing are how many people hoping you get it right when it's your turn to wear the weight. That's why I love that's so kind of pure about the ball field and the battlefield is the meritocracy rules the day. Like hostage rescue kind of only has 2 rules. There's 2 rules to hostage rescue. Do opposite of the person in front of you, and the person who knows most is in charge. Like if you get those things right, it's this fluid crown that moves along the continuum of a mission. So if you're leading, you're a leader. And I define leading as being looked to in a particular moment to make a decision or perform an action based on your unique gifts and abilities. And so we're all leading. And what I say is leaders have to be obsessed with outcomes, not because outcomes are fatalistic and not because they're prophetic. I mean, it's not hard, but outcomes just tell us what to do next. Like if you look at life as like this adventure on a map, an outcome is an assessment of the last effort. And when we have time, we can look at charts and data and graphs and all this other stuff. We have no time. We can distill whatever just happened into one of 5 things, no matter what it was. And it was either bad, it was average, it was good, it was excellent, or it was elite. And bad's just, I mean, no one's watching this live stream, and you guys certainly aren't okay with bad outcomes. Average just doesn't have any secrets. Like in all my 49 years, I've never heard anybody walk up to someone and go, "How have you maintained such mediocrity? Like, how have you stayed so slow?" It's just not a question a lot of people get asked, right? There is a secret to being an average runner if you're a big guy. Like a big guy average runner, from big guys, it's extraordinary. If you're an average runner, you're an elite runner if you're over 250 pounds, right? And people ask me all the time, like, how'd you make it through training? Like, here's the secret to big man running. The secret to big man running is this: lean forward until you're about to fall over, then don't. Just for however far you got to go. It's like, you don't look cool, but you make the times. It's like a gravity assisted completion, right? And then you have good. And good's okay if it's not our passion or our profession. But if it's our passion or profession, I'd submit to you that on the continuum of outcomes, the only thing we should be willing to accept from ourselves and others is somewhere between excellent and elite on this continuum of outcomes. And so the natural question is, people ask me, is like, to you, what is the difference between being excellent and being elite? And for me, here's what it is. Excellence is great, but excellence is quantifiable. It's real, it's measurable. And elite is this mythical ridge line that's just a little bit further than what you thought you could do until you got to excellent. So excellence is this X on a map, and we ought to get to it, and we ought to celebrate it, and we ought to aspire to it. But once you're on that ridge line, or once you're at that X on the map, you kind of got 2 choices. You can stay there, you can go back from where you came, or you can look for some mist-covered ridge line and go, "Hey, what's that? Who wants to go there?" And I've always told my daughters, like, "Hey, just pick some high, hard X and go." And you don't even have to be right about that, where that is. You just got to be going and taking notes, right? And so for me, elite is this kind of constant gravitational pull to figure out who I can be around that scares me today, that I'm going to have to work hard to keep up with, and on these maps that matter most to me, right? And so, putting it on the line is kind of that threshold, right? That threshold between what you know you can do and what you wonder if you can do. That line is kind of the border between those 2 things. And so I think putting it on the line is just a way to steward your life. And I think, for me, I lost a lot of people in my life. I lost my father when I was young. And I think you kind of come to grips with mortality. And then you go through this thing where you're reckless and stupid. But you don't want to be safe. So you find this kind of happy tension between stewarding your life in a way that's honorable, worthy, and purposeful. And I think that's kind of where the line is for me, is being accountable for my days.
I like that. Shaun, thoughts?
Yeah, something that you'd said in respect to putting it on the line, and that it is and I'm going to paraphrase here, try to crystallize it into, it's a worthy pursuit, putting it on the line. The more that you do it, the more frequently you do it, the more consistently you do it, the better you get at it, the more used to it you get at it, the more comfortable it feels, etc. So as you were kind of stating these things, again, I'm paraphrasing, an image came to mind, and it is this. As kids, whether we learn to, or whether we're taught to or indoctrinated into it, Christmas time. Kids start looking forward to Christmas time, unwrapping those Christmas presents months in advance. I remember my 2 young sons, it'd be like October, and they'd be kind of already sort of identifying in their young minds what they hoped they might get at Christmas time. And that was only understood on Christmas Day. As they were unwrapping it, they were so excited to see if their hopes and dreams were going to be met, if the thing that they'd idealized or visualized was the thing that was going to be just under that thin wrapper of paper. And so their day could be driven by, wow, it showed up. That thing that I've been thinking about for weeks or months is now here. I'm unwrapping it, and I'm so happy. And that's kind of how Christmas unfolds for kids as they get older and older. Christmas becomes less and less important. But what I'd like to establish is that I think everyone should run their day like a Christmas day, like unwrapping the present. That's how I try to unwrap my day. When I wake up and I open my eyes for the first time, I look at it something to unwrap, a new present to unwrap and try to discover what it provides for me, or what I am going to be excited about, that new thing that I've never seen before. So how is it that as kids we can focus months in advance and be excited about something that we don't understand, but we're really looking forward to? But as adults, we've lost the joy of Christmas. We've lost the joy of the exciting unknown in front of us that we really want to unwrap and play with, for lack of a better term. And now I'm speaking metaphorically. How is it that we lose that joy or that drive or that passion to explore and play with something as adults? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's I think a lot of that has to do with what you define as a present and what you're willing to accept as a present and as a gift to yourself or from somebody else. And I think you have no small ambitions when you're a kid, right? And when you're a kid, everything seems possible, and it's either going to be given to you, you can find it. And I think there's some point in time where some people just kind of begin to accept that which is in front of them instead of looking beyond it. And like, that's for me. I don't mean to vilify that. I have to work really hard. So one of the things I tell people is like the difference between being excellent and elite is, are you done or you're not done yet? And I try not to vilify being done, because I tell people, it's like, hey, if you're done, you just got to tell me so I can celebrate you and honor your effort. But if I'm not done yet and you are, then we are beginning to be incompatible. And I just love you too much and I like you one day. So I don't mean to vilify this concept of being done. If you're done doing something, like the worst thing you do is keep doing something after you're done, especially in the profession of arms. Like the mission and the men next to you deserve better than that. James says a dual-minded man is unstable in all his ways, right? So I don't vilify that. But I think a lot of it has to do with what you think you're capable of and what you think. When you begin to moderate your own expectations about yourself, right? And I tell my daughters, someone asked me one time, hey, what's the difference between being, there's a difference between being excellent and elite talent? I go, no, it's not. If anything, my life's kind of revealed to me that there's a point in time where talent becomes a limitation, because your confidence begins to be in your talent, based on your ability to grind. And I tell people, like, I love going against talented people, because talented people sometimes don't know how to grind, and that's all I know how to do. Like, my gift is not being gifted, because the way I say it is like the mountain makes all men and women average if you're aiming high enough. And if you don't have angles and allies on top of your advantages, you're not going to make it, because no one's good enough to make it on their own, right? So I've never really started anything without angles and allies and understanding my advantages. And angles are craftsmanship, reduction of inefficiencies and frictions. And allies are surround yourself with people who mean what they say as much as you mean what you say. And advantages are understanding what you are, understanding what you're not, and understanding what the X takes. And like I said, I'm not a very talented person. If you're to aggregate all my gifts and abilities, you'd find me to be a high C or a low B in just about everything except for looks. I'm a good looking guy. Like, it is what it is. I mean,
You are so good looking.
I know. I mean, I walked out of the house this morning and I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and I turned and looked at my bride and I said, hey, babe, I can turn it down, but I can't turn it off. And she laughed too, which is a little hurtful. I'm not a good looking guy. Like I said,
there's no mirrors cracking when you walk past it.
No. But my gift is, I tell everybody, like, I loved football way before football loved me. And I had to realize, I decided while I was playing, and it wasn't going to be fame. And the byproduct of deciding to say was something I wasn't good at was eventually cultivating some real skill in it, because I couldn't place my confidence in size and speed and strength. I had to find these other things. And all of a sudden, when these other things happen and then size and strength comes alongside it, now you're formidable. Now you're a formidable deal, right? So I talk to my daughters all the time about this stuff. And, I talk about the achieving average. It's trying to, I don't diminish talent. Talent's real, but it's only 1/3 of the equation. And I tell my girls, like, hey, self-selecting out of an adventure is not humility. If anything, it's one of the most arrogant things you can do. Because when you say you can't, this is what you're saying. You're saying, I know everything I need to know about myself and everything I need to know about the thing. Those pretty bold statements. To say you know everything you know about yourself and everything you need to know about the mountain, that's pretty remarkable, right? And so it's not arrogant to say it's not humble to say I can't. It's arrogant, right? And that's why I love reading. I grew up, Lord of the Rings, and if Middle Earth existed, I would tell you, and you canvassed all population for who's going to save the world, no one, including the hobbits, would have said them. And that was kind of Tolkien's point. Tolkien's point was the littlest among these, right? So at some point in time, and I think it's more nurture than nature, people yield and settle to X's they know they can get to you, vice ones that scare them. And they kind of forget that the real value is the adventure to get to this thing. Like that's because there's nothing more anticlimactic than the moments after you do what you've been trying to do, right?
Absolutely. We got a couple comments here that I wanted to touch on, but it goes to exactly what you're saying. Paul says the idea of the thing is better than the actual thing. The joy is in the anticipation, and we talk about this all the time. And the understand the journey, because the journey is more important than the destination, all that stuff. But the way you put it just a second ago made me think of standing at the base of a mountain or standing at a start line and going, yeah, I know everything here, and then walking away.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? I mean, what a great metaphor. I love that you just said it. Can you imagine walking up to the Boston Marathon and go, nah, I ain't do it. Like, but that's kind of what you do when you look at someone and say they're better than you, and you look at someone and say, I can't. Like, effectively, you're doing the same thing. Yeah. Nah, I can do that. I don't even need to try because I know I can. Let's go do something else, right? Like, just try and take notes,
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes back to the fear of losing out. So, sure. And I mean, like, fear of losing for sure, but putting stuff on the line when the concept of it is you're going to have to sacrifice something, right? You're placing something up on basically a sacrificial altar for you to attain something else. Yeah. And so I was thinking about it as you were talking, and that just the concept of having to sacrifice something in order to achieve another goal, I think that's the initial boundary that a lot of people won't cross, let alone getting there and actually doing the work. It's just like, I don't want to lose what I have, so I'm just not.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like, what are you actually gaining when you're not willing to lose something? Like, what are you actually gaining? What's the actual gain in that, right? So, I mean, you run the economics on it, and stasis is pretty costly, right? Morally, mentally, spiritually, physically, and so I mean, when you sit back and think, like, what did I actually gain by not trying? And it'll reveal to you is like probably not as much as you thought.
Yeah, 100%. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
I do. I'm listening to you guys, and what I'm hearing is a lot of really, really good wisdom, really experiential learning, where it's been established how effective the process is once you engage in it, and the outcomes are notable. We'll call them moving someone towards a more elite capability. However, when I was a young buck, when I was a teenager, no one was passing on any wisdom, and no one actually knew how to do it well. And at least in my life, when I was young. And so all I had to count on at that time was, as I like to refer to it, stubbornness. I'm a stubborn guy. And so if I know I want to do something, usually I don't know how to do it. I just stubborn my way through it.
Yeah.
Call it grit, call it focus, call it discipline, call it whatever you want, but I'm just freaking stubborn, man. And once I see something off on the horizon, and I want to be careful with words here. Chance, you were talking about standing at the base of a mountain and thinking, or you're standing on a start line. How I view the world is, to bring it back to Tolkien, I see it as the misty mountains off in the far distance. I'm standing in the Shire. all comfortable and having my second breakfast. And so it's my responsibility to look to the horizon, see the Misty Mountains, and understand that before I even get to the freaking base of the Misty Mountains, I've got a whole lot of walking to do. And I'll engage in that because I'm stubborn. And I think that that's important for young folks out there right now, or anyone who's really never crushed in life, is if you can adopt a certain amount of stubbornness, the rest takes care of itself. It doesn't matter if you start heading towards the Misty Mountains and you get down into a little bit of low ground in some fog and you get disoriented, and now you're on a bearing of 240 degrees off to the flank there, going in the completely wrong direction. It doesn't matter. Through stubbornness, you'll recalibrate, find the mountains again, start heading in the right direction. But I think that if you have no skills, no talent, no nothing, and all you've got is stubbornness will get you to the finish line.
That's funny. I've had a variety of different surgeries, and I tore my bicep, and my buddy put it back on as a surgeon, and I he's finding out about this now. So I took the cast off like 3 days after and my bride was like, "You got to call the doctor." I said, "Okay." So I called him. I said, "Hey man, what happens if my cast falls off?" He's like, "Just fell off." I'm like, "Yep, just fell off." Right. And he kind of exhaled. He's like, "Well, don't get it wet." And I said, "Okay." And then next week he called me, check on me. I said, "Well, I'm doing this. He goes, Clint, all of medical innovation is based on non-compliant patients. So in my view, non-compliance is a service to humanity. Non-compliance with a norm, aka stubbornness. All of innovation comes down to the stubborn man or the stubborn woman, or the uncommon man. It's a great poem. The unreasonable man, the unreasonable woman. All innovation is due to the unreasonable man or woman.
I have been accused of being unreasonable, so that's awesome.
Yeah,
maybe once or twice.
Humanity thanks you. Humanity thanks you.
There you go.
Maybe not today, but later.
Yeah, and now you can look at your wife and be like, "You're welcome."
Yeah, exactly.
I'm doing this for humanity.
Like it was Seneca or Epictetus said, "If you want to create change, be willing to be thought crazy and foolish in your own time." And my wife's like, I was like, "Listen, I'm just doing my part for humanity." Epictetus talked about this. Seneca talked about this. Like, so I have a moral obligation to figure out if this is real or not.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I got a question here from one of the viewers here. Daniel says, "Trial by fire until the right path idea is found and pursued." Like the trial and error method. Is that a consistent way to do things?
Yeah, man. Listen, as a default, it's a great plan. I think trial by fire, but you got to take notes. Like again, I'm a word scout like you guys are, and I was telling I was kind of so I like verbing things. I like turning things into a verb. So leading, leaders leading is a verb. Like so, championing. When you're championing, that means you're consistently producing championships over and over again. You're not a one-hit wonder, right? And as I've kind of observed and been around, one of the things I tell people is, and there's really 4 qualities you see when you're around champions. It's passion, talent, precision, and endurance. And the higher up you go, the less passion and talent matter. And it's not because they don't matter, it's just everybody's got them. At that level, everybody's got passion, everybody's got talent. So the difference is in precision and endurance. And I look at precision maybe differently than others. Maybe not, maybe so. I don't think precision is being right more. I think precision is being wrong less. That's a more faithful way to articulate it. I mean, being right more, that's an academic statement. Like I hate it in sports where they go, he gets stronger as the game goes on. She gets stronger as the game goes on. No one gets stronger as the game goes on. What you're seeing is someone decline more slowly, right? And so for me, precision is making less mistakes for longer than your competition. So if you back that up a little bit, how do you learn what a mistake is? Well, you do it. And I was with this NFL coach. He's wonderful. And he yelled, "Make no mistakes." And I flinched when he said it. And he sees everything. He's very wise. And as we were walking off the field, because I was just visiting with the team, He goes, "Hey, when I said make no mistakes, you flinched." And I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Well, I'll answer your question, but it's not apples to apples. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm just answering your question. I haven't done what you've done. I don't do what you do, but I'll answer your question." I said, "All these guys are geniuses. Like at that level, everybody's a genius. They're physical geniuses at minimum. More of them are intellectual geniuses than they know because you just gather information, triage, and hierarchy, and you perform. So the hard wiring for genius is there. And the worst thing you can do with genius is tell genius to make no mistakes, because genius is what evolves the craft. I said, in the special operations, I'm dealing with geniuses all the time, right? And I used to tell my guys, hey, make new mistakes. And when you say make new mistakes, you're availing yourself to the creativity of genius, right? But you're also commanding it to be a pro. Because in order to make new mistakes, what do you got to know? Everything about your old ones. And so, and even if there's physiology that supports this, like the brain lacks the ability to grow based on success. The brain's a calorie carnivore, man. It consumes more calories than anything else. And so it's like a lion. Like lions don't like doing anything until they're being a lion. Like nature teaches a lot. Like great white sharks, Shark Week's boring until the shark's being a shark. You see this great white shark just lollygagging through the ocean, then it just becomes this 3,500-pound missile. You're like, oh, right? And what apex predators are always doing is they're constantly optimizing because they know two things. They're going to have to burst. They're going to have to ascend into this perfect version of who they are to take their prey or to defend their pride. They're in this constant state of optimization, right? And you only learn that by doing it. And so the brain doesn't like going to work unless it's got fear of failure. Fear of failure or pain are the only reasons it causes the brain to work. So adversity and mistakes, that's what makes us grow. Both literally and metaphorically. Like it's the physiological precursor for growth in the brain is struggle. That's just what happens, right? So yeah, I mean, trial by fire, just but take notes, like make new mistakes. Like there's no reason to relearn. That's why I love learning from others. That's why I love reading and I love talking to guys because I get to learn from them what they learned the hard way, which means I get to remember it without having to do it. Yeah. I love reading. And one of the guys asked me why I love reading. I said, man, if you and I are fighting and I'm remembering and you're learning, I'm going to win because remembering is faster than learning.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity to learn from others, I mean, that's the obligation we have.
Yeah, I like that. Shaun?
There's a couple of things there, just as you just stated at the back end here, you're talking about reading and learning and versus someone who's figuring it out in the real time. Well, there is more nuance to that, and I'm sure you would have stated it. It's simply future prediction based on your past experiences, creating a model that you can analytically predict the near future, and usually it'll play out as you visualize it based on how much depth of experience you've got in that particular moment. And so there is a little bit of future casting, as it were, depending on how much a person has seen of life. The other thing that I wanted to state is you'd mentioned that endurance is, or the idea of being able to work is less important than some of the things that you'd mentioned, because it's natural for humans over a period of a timeline to decay in their ability to put out workload. Well, that is true until you become better at understanding how to play that game. And I'll use myself as an example. I was a world champion in 24-hour solo mountain bike racing, which requires a lot of work over a period of a full day. And so there's many ways to skin a cat, as they say. And I've raced 30 24-hour solos, and I've done it a bunch of different ways in a strategic and tactical sense. So one of the strategies that a person can use is negative splits, where you work the field, you put the boots to everyone, and then you let them slip away up front, and because you've dialed back your pace, because now it's a psychological warfare game. And so maybe around hour 12, maybe around hour 16, maybe around hour 18, now I'm going to dial up the pace as a negative split, and I'm going to work harder in those last 6 hours than I worked in those first 6 hours. And that's where I'm going to be passing people, breaking their spirit, breaking their will, breaking their minds. and ultimately becoming a world champion in so doing. And so I think that there is a variety of different ways that someone can set their pace in a race, in an event, in life, so that it is not a decaying workload. I feel, and I'm 60 this year, I feel that my intellectual pace, my intellectual ability to put out workload is better now than it was when I was 40.
Yeah.
And it's simply because I understand the game better than I
Yeah.
did when.
Well, I may have misspoken, or you may have misheard me when I was talking about endurance. So for me, I'm not talking about the physiological endurance. What I'm saying is, if you make less mistakes, the byproduct of that is you have more endurance. So passion, talent, precision, and endurance, the less mistakes you may have, the more endurance you're contributing to the endurance tank, the more smooth your operational processes are, because every mistake costs energy, right? So if you make mistakes, if you make less mistakes, you conserve more energy that can be applied to doing it better for longer, right? I wasn't really talking about the, for me, endurance, I, so for me, precision and endurance are they're intertwined, like they're dependent on each other. Like the less efficient you are, the less endurance you
I
have.
agree. We're on the same sheet of music
Yeah.
for sure. We're in total agreement on that. I just raised the point for anyone who missed the nuance of the what you were saying and what I heard are the same things, but maybe others didn't hear it that way. So.
Yeah. I'm certainly not speaking about any endurance races.
Well, we've already established that you're the guy hiding around the corner.
The ambush predator, right?
Yeah, I'm the bear in the tree. You're like, I didn't know bears could climb that high. Strong tree.
So let's dive into a little bit more into the not just the concept of putting it online, but let's talk about the physical nature of it. We talked a little bit of the transition from the football field to the SEALs, but now let's talk about like SEALs to the boardroom, because that's a pretty big leap in and of itself. Even
I'd say that was the harder one. For me, the boardroom has always been the most challenging map, because the willingness to suffer has always been like one of my strengths, right? And physical suffering, right? And then the boardroom, your physicality doesn't have as much to do with your success as far as the actual application of your craft, right? Unless you're doing something in that space. And the meritocracy exists in far less intensity in the boardroom. And I think the horizons that are the byproducts of effort in the boardroom are much. The first time I ever really had to wait longer than 2 weeks to get a return on effort was really, I mean, the horizon, the return on effort on the ball field is really quick. The return on effort on the battlefield is pretty quick. The return on effort in the boardroom could be years. I've never had to do anything where you do something on Tuesday and it's going to take you 4 years to figure out if that actually mattered or not. And then for me, just candidly, the boardroom has been in many ways less inspirational, and it profitability is not purpose. That's like saying bullets are no, like for me, more bullets, more missions, right? But revenue for the sake of revenue does not stir the soul. And so understanding this map in such a way that you recognize the need for profitability, so that then you can pour that into purpose. The boardroom is just more murky when it comes to, and I find less inspiration in the boardroom. And there's wonderful men and women out here in the boardroom, but accountability is, there's different rules in the boardroom, and I'm frustrated with it. Like, you couldn't get away with being a cheater on the ball field and the battlefield. You couldn't get away with being deceptive and deceitful and dishonorable on the ball field and the battlefield. But on the boardroom, there's people that make a career out of it, and so the boardroom is where I'm at right now, and there's plenty of wonderful leaders in the boardroom for sure. But and it's not fighting evil. I mean, neither is the ball field, but when the enemy is not directly confronting you every day, it's just a different. What I came to grips with a long time ago is the boardroom exists to bless the breakfast table. Like, for me, I don't I don't define myself by who I am in the boardroom. I look at the boardroom as a place that I can cultivate resources, experience, and the ability to take care of my breakfast table and help others take care of theirs. And now it has meaning again, right?
I like that.
Because the most miserable people I know are the wealthiest people I know. A lot of them. So I was like, well, it's not that. I mean, read Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes will crack the code on that one real quick. Wealthiest man in the world, and Solomon's going like, yeah, it's not that. You know.
Yeah. Shaun, what are your thoughts on it?
I do have some thoughts on the error based on my own experiences. So when I left Tier 1 Special Operations, I went into computer system engineering, went back to school, and got in my own form of a boardroom where I was running a computer school, running several classes as the head instructor, etc., and in boardrooms making presentations to executives on how to better improve their yada, yada, yada. And the boardroom is all of the things that you said, pal. It is not an environment that in fact, it's a more hostile environment than maybe a battlefield in some regards. But it's only that if you don't know how to play the game. And so, and I'm not directing this at you. I'm directing this at anyone who's listening. It's only hostile if you don't understand the rule set or the environmental conditions, as it were. But that takes time. And so initially, the boardroom can be extremely uncomfortable, or at least it was for me, until I figured out how to play the boardroom. And as frustrating as it was initially, what came to realize is that perhaps by working in the boardroom in a way that is creating change in minds, not in processes, but in minds, I could inject some thought processes into their brains, plant those seeds, so that they're now influencing thousands of people.
That's right. That's right. When the good guys win, when the tone is the good guys win, then in the boardroom, that becomes like I started falling in love with just going against really bad dudes that did the same thing I did. I'm like, hey man, if I win this contract, we're going to help build this. We're going to help do that. If you win that contract, you're going to go snort a line of blow and grab some hookers. So I have a moral obligation to put you out of business. I'm going to break you. Because if I break you, you're going to go away or you're going to get better. But so for me, there's plenty of amoral, and I'm not representing myself as this like morally great person. I try to be. I want to be a great husband and daddy, and like I tell people, I want to be the kind of guy my girls want to marry one day, and be purposeful, passionate, protective, and a provider. And if I see a guy who does what I do, and he's not like that, then he's, for the purposes of competition on the boardroom, he's just an enemy.
It's game on.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, let's dive into a little bit more than we got a few more minutes. Let's talk about the breakfast table, because I think this is very important too. And I like the fact that you have these separated into very distinct separate entities, because not that they're separate entities, but they
no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
From a visual perspective, just so we can be all on the same page, at least is how I see it. For me, the breakfast table is that foundational map that you pull up first. And the boardroom and the ball field and the battlefield are layers that you talk along. Right. But if you open up Google Maps, that for me, that breakfast table is the opening map.
Right.
And then all these they're just layers that you put on top of it, topography, climate, whatever you want to do. But for me, like it is the one that I just want to get right. Right. That for me is just the most important map, is that breakfast table.
So how do you put it on the line at the breakfast table?
Oh man. So I'll go back to pursuing elite. One of the things I talk about is the most elite people I've ever been around on all these maps: ball field, battlefield, boardroom, breakfast table. They have what I call them the pursuit points. They're balanced, they're curious, they're tribal, they're intentional, and they're authentic. And balance is a really, really important thing, but balance is not an equal distribution of effort. Balance is a hierarchy of priorities. And so for me, balance is investing in friends and family and faith that can remind you who you are and what you're about when the world tries to make you forget, because that's the world's job. Like the world seeks par. Like the world, the world doesn't like exceptional. And so for me, investing in a family and building a family that reminded me who I am when the world tries to make me forget. and there's a process to that. Like, everyone, I think the most elite people I've always known I've always found a process or built a process to help them to stay faithful. You got to make a decision, then you have a design. A design is that process, and discipline is how you remember your decisions and your design when stuff gets hard. And so I remember I had this conversation, and let me text the guy real quick. And
definitely.
Yeah.
Gotta say, we're just over 200 episodes in, and no one ever has done that. That's wild.
There we go. I was getting us more time. But like for me, I got this question one time, and this really great athlete goes, Clint, he played football, played tight end. He goes, how can I make sure I'm as good a daddy as I am a tight end? And I kind of said, well, what are the reps, right? And it's kind of these questions where you're answering real time for yourself, but you're kind of like, huh. And I said, well, in order to execute our craft, we iterated reps over and over again, and then we came together so we can perform under pressure. So there has to be a supply chain of being an extraordinary father. And once you figure out what those are, then you just do those, just like you're at the gym, just like you're at the range. Like, what are the steps, right? And in the back of my mind, I was like, that sounds pretty good. You got to do that too, Clint. And, we all heard the 10,000 repetition rule, and I think it's probably true. The problem I have with it is we typically apply it to our passions and our professions. We don't apply it to our personal lives. And so at least I didn't. But my deal is you measure what matters and you count what counts. So I'm like, okay, what does an elite husband do? And I wrote these. I asked my bride, I was like, hey, I don't know. I said, I want to be an elite husband. I don't know if I've done 10,000 things that an elite husband does. And she said, you haven't. I'm like, hold on. I wasn't asking you. I was saying perhaps maybe, right? But I got a list. I got 5. Hey, what are 5 things that you think an elite husband does? And I went to my daughters, what are 5 things? And man, it's right here. It's just like a workout in the gym. I got my reps right here. Like, I'm counting. And so for me, I know what it takes to be an elite husband. I know what it takes to be an elite daddy. I know what it takes to be an elite friend, because I've learned it and I've asked people who I admire and respect, and then I go to work, and not having a father, that was interesting for me, man. Like, I would go up to a guy and like, my wife would be like, you got to work on your approach. Because I'd walk up to a guy and like, hey, your daughters don't hate you. How do you do that? She's like, not a bad question, but you scared him. I was like, oh, sorry, right? But the knowledge is out there. Like, no one can tell me they can't find a way to be a better version of themselves. Like, that's kind of a cop out. But for me, there's someone within your world that you aspire to have be the high ground. The high ground is the way you get to the high ground is always the same, regardless of what map you're on. You find and follow the right people to the right places. You become your version of what you love most about them. This aggregate, this composite.
So with that in mind, let me ask you a direct question, not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious. Who do you aspire to be?
Man, that's a long list. Like, I don't aspire to be anybody in particular, like a clone, but this aggregate on the ball field. Like I try to be this aggregate of Dick Butkus and Jack Lambert and Jack Ham and some of these great football players. Like, I was a composite of those things. Man, that's why we have senior enlisted in the military. We have senior enlisted as a young officer. I was like, man, what officers does that guy listen to and respect? Because earning the respect of that guy is my goal. Like, how do I do that? And the boardroom's the same. You find presidents and CEOs and founders of companies that are leading in a way that they don't have to. You got to win in a way that you don't have to get the trophy back, right? And there's plenty of people to find. The breakfast table. I go to this great church down here in Dallas, and I was looking at these men that had relationships with their daughters at the seasons of life that my daughters are in. I was like, all right, how do you do that? So the list is really long. Why would I ever deny myself multiple mentors? So it's hard to single it down to like a particular single person.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. Now we're just about rolling over time here, so let's do some final thoughts and then we'll shut it down for the afternoon. But Clint, before we get there, I just want to say thanks very much, man. This has been a great
is great
conversation.
I love listening to you guys talk and learning from you.
Well, so let's what's some final thoughts? What on putting it on the line, on the different battlefield or the different seasons of your life? Anything that we've talked about today?
It's worth it. I tell people, like, the scars tell stories. And I told a friend this the other day. I said, fear the unscarred man. because he's either lying to you or he's never dared, and both of those are dangerous to be around. And so, yeah, you're gonna get scars, but the scars are worth it, right? Just try to get new ones and try to learn from everybody else's, right? And you know, put it on the line. It's just if everything's this cost benefit analysis, I would tell you that having a put it on the line kind of mentality, and whatever your world is, like you don't like this is, I have friends that have never been on the ball field, they've never been on the battlefield, but they have a brilliance and they have an ability on the boardroom that I respect and admire, and I know they've suffered, and I know they've led well, and I watched them endure financial fear in a way that I don't know that I could. So it's not unique to any of those maps. It's more just who you are and how you apply it on these maps. But putting on the line is worth it. Yeah, it hurts, but all good things do.
I like it. Shaun, final thoughts?
Putting it on the line is a phrase that has a sense of a point in time. I'm going to put it on the line in that next event. I'm going to put it on the line for my daughter. I'm going to put it on the line for fill in the blank. But I don't look at putting it on the line as that. I don't look at it as a finite point in time. I look at it as an infinite continuum of time. I'm always putting it on the line. Right now, I'm putting it on the line.
Ethos.
The moment that I finish this, I'm going to continue to put it on the line. My life has always been, I'll put it on the line. And by put it on the line, I mean, it'll get my best effort, but I'll frickin' get after it and own the moment of putting it on the line. And however it plays out, the outcome, good, bad, indifferent, that's for me to solve and get better at in the future. But I just want everyone to understand that putting it on the line, the phrase, doesn't mean that you're casting forward into the future 12 years from now where you're eventually going to put it on the line. Put it on the line every single moment in the now.
100%. Well, that's and both great summations of what we were talking about. And really, it just comes down to the fact that, it says it right here at the bottom. Every moment, do your best every day. And that's you putting it on the line. So as you learn where your line is, you can build out how you're going to put yourself there. And then you can grow as a person that you're meant to be every day. You can do that with us here on The Collective. See y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.
Thank y'all.